One of my personal training clients asked me how I found my artistic style. We had just wrapped up our weekly session where we were talking about all of these exercise principles and fundamentals, and he wanted to continue the conversation about the other arm of my business, which is my art. So I called him back on FaceTime so that I could walk around my studio and potentially show him some of my pieces, and I kind of launched into this tirade about how I found my artistic style. And my answer was kind of a non-answer in the sense that it doesn't really portray how I found my style, but it does tell the story about how I think I can paint things that I like. So when I first started painting, I was truly just smacking paint on canvas. I was doing something that I considered like action painting, where most of my time was just spent at a palette mixing paint around because I enjoyed that the most. I would just put it on a canvas without too much concern for what it looked like or any representation or anything like that. I was really bad at drawing, and I'm still pretty bad at drawing, so I made no attempt to do anything other than just inhabit my body and see what I could create in this sort of zoned out flow state period. And I did very quickly figure out what I liked about painting, which was just the act of mixing color itself, and then seeing how I could apply it to a canvas with particularly a palette knife. But I think the important thing that I found about the process is that we need to let our bodies lead the experience. I found that my gut would make a particular judgment after I finished two different paintings, telling me this one is better. And it's not like a critical judgment, but it's certainly something that you can make the call on. You can say, between these two paintings, I like this one more. And in my case, I didn't know exactly why I felt this way. I just knew that I had a preference. And I quickly found that I could take that sense of preference between two different paintings and then apply it to the process of working on a piece in real time. So whatever subjective quality I was leaning into, saying I prefer this finished piece, I would take that at the easel and then use that to inform my decisions. Like, oh, I prefer using this color next to this red. Or, oh, I think I should actually use some smaller forms here and some bigger forms here, just purely based on what my gut was telling me. So I consider the way that I found my style was just making a discernment in taste over time, where I'd trust my body to say, between these two pieces, I like this more, and then when I'm at the easel working, I like this choice more than I like this choice. And I recognize that very little of my ability to paint comes from particular techniques. And I think it's kind of funny that I've found that I just use my gut to tell me which of these two colors I prefer, because there are objective ways like color theory to find out what makes sense in any given moment, but I would rather just let the process be led by my sense of taste. And I do think that painting requires planning, especially as I have expanded into some more representational work. I do recognize the value in planning and objective techniques, but I would prefer to just let my gut lead through the entire process, telling me if I'm doing the things that I need to be doing to have something successful. Body awareness is the reason that you have taste. Otherwise, why would we choose one piece of art over another? I think objective measures can only take us so far. Why would you hang a particular piece of art in your home unless it made you feel a certain way? And I think for us to figure out what art we should add to our space, we have to pay attention to what our body is telling us so that we can identify the feelings that the art gives us and then try to craft that in our aesthetic. And this is kind of why I prefer to make paintings that are calming or warm or add positive sentiment to my environment. If you hang up a bunch of art that is really negative, your environment is going to be negative, and then your mind will probably follow the way that your body is reacting to those images. And I'd love to hear from you. What art makes you feel a certain way? And can you pinpoint why you feel that way, or is it just a gut feeling? Even if you're not an artist, I want you to understand the value in the production of art. And I don't necessarily mean the value of the art after it's completed, but in the process of making art. I'm talking about the individual moments in the chain of making a piece. And this process and its effects are not necessarily constrained to just art production, and I would encourage you to think about how this applies to your own life or your own work. To me, the most interesting part about art is the moment where we synthesize what we know and what we have as our ability to make it concrete. And this moment occurs kind of in two different parts. The first being where we're able to see it more vividly or really put it in our mind's eye. And then the second is the ability for us to translate that into our physical environment. I think about the doves in my neighborhood, and it's one of those things where I know what a dove looks like, but do I actually have the ability to make that concrete in my mind's eye? And then am I able to draw it out or paint it out in a way that feels like it's true to that first thought that I had? Not necessarily the thing that's concrete, but the thing that I know. And it's funny because there are some subjective judgments in quality that we make along these two different steps. Some people are better at taking an idea, this abstract thing, and then making it concrete in a way that is either fun or sentimental or asserts a certain emotional response to that thing that we know. And other people are better at representing the thing that we have in our concrete form into our environment. And other people are better at taking that more concrete, established thought and putting it to paper. To me, the most interesting part is actually the subjective judgments that we place on both of these steps. So listening to our gut to say whether or not we are moving in the right direction, being true to representing the thing that we knew in the first place. And sometimes when we make art, we miss. If we have gaps in both the technical abilities and our subjective assessments of how our piece is progressing, the art might just fall flat. And I think this is where volume comes in to save us as artists. The answer is almost always that you just need to make more. And if we don't adequately capture the thing that we were going for the first time, we can always just make something else that might leverage that learning experience of our past mistakes, in that maybe we need to work on our brushwork skills, maybe our eye for composition, or maybe just leaning into letting our gut tell us if we are moving in the right direction. I know that I've made paintings where I ignored what my gut was saying, and every time I don't like the final piece. So as the one thing that I've learned in making art, it's that you really need to let your body and your gut drive the process. If you're interested in reading more about this concept, you can find the information on my blog on my website. The link is in my bio. And follow for more thoughts on the artistic practice.